Ikomi Ozi. Kiwis. Engelse. Hanne. Mavazi manne.
Well, I can see that David did not actually hear that, but David, I have just introed you with Yikomi Bokke, and I think that it's a very, very appropriate bit of music given exactly what happened over the weekend. My goodness, our pride and joy of South Africa, the Springboks, pulling victory out of the jaws of defeat. And I'm sure that given the time that you guys must have invested in the presentation that's going to be following for the next 20 minutes or so, you must have been biting a little bit, because had the guys not won, I guess it was back to the drawing board for you when you have a look back to the month of August.
Certainly would have been. The team debated if we should have two versions, and being quite optimistic, I thought, no, we can't have two versions. We can't create a version of South Africa losing. If that happens, we would have just had a very, very busy Sunday. But as luck will have it, the box came through, so we managed to send out our Decoding the Month video literally as the whistle blew on Saturday evening.
And here we are on early Monday morning, picking up as well. I suppose the country is still enjoying the celebrations. You got to look forward to next Saturday, as well. We're going to be missing our captain after his jaw was broken. But outside of that, you'd think that Rassie Erasmus and co would be even better prepared to put one over the Kiwis. But let's see. Let's not talk rugby. Let's talk markets, because that's what we do every month, David. Just by way of background, could you explain why you guys at Corion Capital put together the report on a monthly basis, looking back at the results of the market's performance?
Well, at Corion, we have three main values that try and define us. That's simplicity, engagement, and agility. So the world of investing is quite complex, and there's a lot of jargon. So what we try and do is try and break out what's happening in the markets in a simple manner, get it out quickly, and make it a bit engaging and entertaining for people to understand. So it's not this really difficult topic for people to understand what's happening in world market events.
Okie doke. Let's get into the first of the slide or parts of the presentation today. And you've drawn back on, was it in 1995 that we all got so excited about PJ Powers and her song, The World in Union?
Correct. So it was obviously a pun, being that markets were actually also in union for the month, and union obviously being rugby union. And that's what happened during August, where there was significant volatility in equity markets and animal spirits seemed to be alive and well. The month began with major indices like the S&P 500 recording their biggest one-day losses in nearly 2 years. That downturn was linked to fears of a US recession and a stronger Japanese yen, which disrupted many carry trades and heightened global market anxieties. So, from a real low in world equity markets, the union, so to speak, reversed and fears erased, and that was boosted by Powell's confirmation that the Fed is at last ready to move on interest rates. And from almost an 8% collapse in global equity markets actually ended up positive for the month. So quite a lot of volatility, and at the end of the day, it was green across the board.
What's the carry trade that you mentioned there, the Japanese carry trade? What's that all about?
The carry trade refers to when investors borrow at low interest rates and invest at higher yielding assets. They carry the lower yielding cost of borrowing, and they use that to invest elsewhere. And it works really well for a long period of time until it doesn't. And that's what happened with the yen. So, the yen, or the central bank of Japan, unexpectedly raised interest rates. So that whole idea of borrowing at low rates, expecting the currency not to move, and investing in other markets was a major event at the beginning of the month. And that was the reason why the Japanese stock market had its biggest one-day drop, I think, since 1987. So it was a significant event. Fundamentals didn't really change. The markets weren't really reporting worse earnings. So, at Corion, when you see a bigger unwind and you're sticking to your fundamentals, we saw that as an opportunity. And fortunately for our clients, we bought a little bit more. But it really was a very, very volatile month.
And maybe just to go into a little more detail, you said you bought at a time that benefited your clients. Explain.
Well, when markets were down 13% in one day, I'm talking about Japanese markets, and we couldn't really understand what had fundamentally changed. Sometimes what you do is you do a lot of research and you think, should we do it? And you conduct that research over 2 weeks. But in that kind of volatility, you'll miss the boat. So what we sometimes do at Corion is we buy first and research later. So we buy into volatility and we just get our toe in the water, so to speak. And if our further research validates our position, we'll add to it. But in those kind of events, it's very difficult to, you'll miss the boat if you do the research after the event. You've got to know where Japanese valuations are, which you do when the volatilities happen. And if you think that was appealing the day before, and what's just really happened, you're getting a 10% sale on the asset, I think you've got to be a bit opportunistic.
A very interesting point. I can remember with the COVID crisis as well in February, March 2020. It was a similar situation. The markets tanked. I was talking to the CEO of Sasol and asking him how he felt being a member of the executive team when they saw their share price going down to 20 Rand. And I do recall when we added Sasol to the BizNews portfolio, I was getting a lot of emails from people saying, are you mad? This thing's going bust. Well, of course, we know that sometimes those fat pitches do come along. Just help us through here. I'm so glad you've got included in your presentation today is a guy from my prep school, the only one who's playing for the Springboks at the moment, Jesse Creel. What's the story here about the US debt?
Well, on this slide, we call it Creeling Softly, and we're showing Jesse Creel looking at the US debt rising. I'm sure he probably wasn't looking at it during the month. He had more important matters in his mind. But it was just a reminder for investors that, markets are back at its all-time highs and going up. But there are some worries out there, and the US debt or global debt is still very much front of mind at Corion. The US debt, I think in the 1980s, debt to GDP was about 40%. Now it's like 130%. That's a significant increase, and it's increased significantly over the last few years on the back of COVID, etc. So, the fear is that, this debt will ultimately lead to a high cost of borrowing, crowding out potential private investments, which is not good for investors.
There is an article on this subject on BizNews, in fact, in the free-to-air area today, where it talks about the debt and then also about the impact that it could have on the American position as the reserve currency. So, a very important area that you've raised there. Onto interest rate cuts.
Yeah, so I think the defining event for last month was the Jackson Hole confirmation by the federal chairman when he almost told the market we are going to be cutting interest rates in September. And now the market is expecting, almost 1% interest rate till the end of the year, 75 to 1% interest rate cuts. So that's a significant pivot from the Fed. Lower interest rates generally helps the consumer, It also helps in terms of valuations, in terms of discounting cash flows earlier, in terms of it being very favorable for equity markets. So that was a defining event, and not just for equity valuations, but I think for the relief of a lot of economies, South Africa certainly being one of them. It's good news for investors.
I'm so pleased that in your presentation you've included our new golden boy, the fly half, Sasha Ngomezulu. What's the Feinberg? Is it Feinberg Ngomezulu or Feinberg Ngomezulu or Ngomezulu Feinberg? Anyway, a good combination of Jewish and Zulu. And well done to this young man. He is just a superstar. And also well done to you guys for featuring him here.
Yeah, I was privileged to actually watch him play rugby at school at Bishop's. My son, actually, when he was playing, said, "Dad, this boy will play for the Springboks." And I was like, yeah, now, son, it's a big world. And he's got that right. So you could see his talent then. In terms of the slide, we said such a golden performance. And it was a pun on his stature and his performance in the rugby game, but also on gold getting to 2,500 per ounce during the month. So all those gold bulls have finally started to smile.
Yeah, they got a Sasha to put into their back pocket as well. And then, of course, the big Eben Etzebeth. Do you think there was mind games that was being played there by our coach, Rassie Erasmus, not naming him first, then bringing him in, and perhaps in that way, maybe just getting a little bit of an advantage?
Rassie never plays mind games, Alec. He's that's not his kind of mode. I'll dismiss that out of hand. But so here we called the slide. It's a breath of fresh air, showing the US dollar to rand, which appreciated very much actually since the elections and the government of national unity. It's gone from almost 1922 to the rand to where it closed at about 1780 to the rand, and that's a further reason why our Reserve Bank is going to cut rates. So you got the dollar cut, the Fed cutting rates, our inflation numbers are going lower, our rand strengthening. So what's happening overseas, is going to happen here, and we're going to cut rates. And that rand strength was a major driver for our bond market, our property shares, and our financial stocks in South Africa.
And the good news about that is that there's less money that consumers then pay on their home loans, and then that money that gets put back, or the savings can get put into the economy as just one part of it. Obviously, the similar situation for companies as well. So lower interest rates do stimulate the economy. Our captain features in your next slide. Help us here.
Yes, we labeled this essay Seeing Green, C-I-N Green. And that was mainly, as a result of what I said: low interest rates, stronger rand, our financial markets, our financial shares were up very, very strong. Resources weren't, but it was enough to carry equity markets up. Our property market was up about 8 to 9%. So that was a significant rally. And you would expect that when interest rates are starting to drop heavily, or be forecast to drop heavily. It's a very sensitive part of the market to interest rates. And our bond market continued its rally. It was up 2.4%. So also nice to see. And nice to see that foreign investors, I think for the second month in a row, were net buyers of South African bonds. So it's amazing how quickly sentiment has seemed to have changed from, I think, where we were in the nadir of April and May, where South Africa certainly wasn't in vogue.
David, just take us through a little bit more there. It seems as though the foreigners are nibbling, given that they've been away for so long. If this were to gather momentum, what impact might that have on South African asset classes, or the valuations thereof?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, it's basic demand and supply and everything that is priced. So when South Africa looks a little bit more stable, a little bit more attractive to investors, and demand increases, there's a limited supply of assets in South Africa that will indefinitely result in price increases. And if you take a step back and you look at who has been buying South African assets, you look at the local institutions and asset managers, and they've really taken a lot of their assets offshore on the back of maybe their market view, but also because their regulations and restrictions on pension funds was increased to 45%. So a lot of institutions were taking their money offshore. So there weren't local buyers of South African assets. And then foreigners weren't buying because of the uncertainty in our political setup and for other reasons. So you had, for almost 5 years, you haven't had more buyers than sellers, which is the reason why we've lagged international markets. So, you can get a little bit of a change in that sentiment from foreign investors can really, lead to significant rallies in our local market.
It's so interesting that you've, on the one hand, if the government of national unity continues, and it irritates me sometimes that the media or some sections of the media almost want to find drama when the drama is now reducing. And I guess that's because they want to get more traffic, I guess. But the drama in South Africa, the normality or stability seems to be coming into the picture more and more with the government of national unity. That's a good thing. But the point you've just made now, that the buyers have been absent for 5 years, and when they don't have to return in greater numbers or in great numbers to make a huge difference. So thanks for outlining that for us. Getting to the individual performers on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, one of our favorite Springboks, Malcolm Marx, although he didn't cover himself in glory to begin with, he played much better later on Saturday. Take us through this.
Correct. So, the shares that made a mark on the month were those really predominantly interest rate sensitive shares, and there's no more interest rate sensitive share than a property company, and one of our biggest property companies is Growth Point, so they were the best performing of the biggest shares on our market. They were up 14% or just over 14%. Not on the back of any news, just on the fact that, when the market starts to price in much lower interest rates, them and the number 2 performing share price, Mr. Price, which was up about 12.3%, those are the shares that you would expect to benefit the most, and they rallied significantly. MTN, I think, slightly different. They were the 3rd best performing share. I think that was on the back of some better news from Nigeria, some new agreements lease agreements that they managed to conclude, plus a slightly stronger Nigerian currency, where previously they've incurred significant foreign exchange losses in their biggest asset, which is actually in Nigeria.
And of course, this increase in the MTN share price came before the Springboks won with their logo on the front of the jerseys, and the other side of the coin now.
Yeah. The other side of the coin, we'd labeled this all black and blue. I think it's maybe a bit harsh because New Zealand really did play well, and what a great rivalry we have, and utmost respect for their culture and their rugby nation. But yeah, the black and blue shares were the resource shares, and on the back of commodity prices not being strong, the rand being very strong, so obviously those companies earning less hard foreign currency affecting their earnings. So you saw the likes of the platinum shares being Northern being the most biggest share under pressure. They were down a massive 26%. Goldfields, they actually came out with an earnings update, so it wasn't just the strong rand, and it was also lower earnings estimates or guidance from the company. That was down 22%, and another resource company, Xora, being down 18%.
Northern CEO today is being quoted in a story on BizNews to say that platinum is platinum companies in South Africa are in existential crisis mode right now. So I guess if you're thinking that negatively, not surprising to see that your share price would fall that far. But let's close it off. We've talk to us.
Yeah, we closed off our report back in our video on we have been razzmatazz. Then just a thank you to Rassie for his leadership, for the contribution he's made to the country. And you just looked at those pictures at Ellis Park, and you're seeing people from different walks of life, different cultures, different upbringings, being united behind a nation. And it's just so nice to see. And he's made a big impact in the broader team, a big impact in the lives of all of us.
He sure has. What about our Minister of Sport? He's making quite an impact too. I don't know if you saw the bear hug he gave our golden girl, Tatiana.
No, that was lovely. I really enjoyed that. I mean, Grayton is I'm following him on Twitter, and he's he seems to be full of positivity and really respectful of the government of national unity. And it's I'm certainly not endorsing him or his party or any party for that matter, but it's just also a nice tale to see things working and people being positive.
I hope there are members of the BizNews community who criticized us for giving him a platform, as they put it, which is not what you do. The whole idea is that you allow people to have an opportunity to state their case. Now looking at this and saying, goodness me, have I ever seen a Minister of Sport who's been that involved in the in the way that the nations love? And it is. I mean, if you think about something, David, you've been a very good cricketer. The passion that South Africans have, even if they don't get to your level of participation in all sports, is just so high. And now you've got a Minister of Sport who actually feels the same way.
Great. Yeah, you can see. I mean, I was privileged to get to know Steve Twetwe through obviously family connections. My father, and he used to come and stay at the house, etc. And yeah, he had that passion, and you could see in the unity coming through in what he said, and the passion for sport. And so if Grayton can match that kind of passion and unity, well, then we're in good hands.
David Bacher with Corion, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.